Welcome back to Alpha Wolf Saga. Before we begin today's story, I want to take a moment to sincerely thank every one of you who continues to watch, support, and spend your time with us. Whether you have been here since the very first story, or you have only recently discovered this channel, your presence means more than you may realize. Every comment you leave, every story you finish, every quiet evening you choose to spend here helps this little world of Alpha Kings, Wolf Pups, forgotten Omegas, hidden betrayals, and unexpected love continue to grow. Here on Alpha Wolf Saga, we believe the strongest stories are not only about power. They are about compassion, about the people everyone overlooks, about wounded hearts learning to trust again, and sometimes, about one very serious Alpha King discovering that the most dangerous thing in his kingdom is not an enemy army, but a kind-hearted Omega who keeps changing his life without even trying. So wherever you are listening from tonight, make yourself comfortable. Stay with me until the end, because today's story begins with two tiny wolf pups, a rushing lake, and one woman who completely misunderstood what their father was trying to do. Let's begin. The smaller wolf pup disappeared beneath the rushing water for the third time before Elena Wren understood that the enormous man standing on the shore had no intention of helping him. "Are you serious?" The words escaped her before good sense could stop them. Cold morning wind swept across Moonwater Basin, carrying the sharp scent of pine, wet stone, and the crushed herbs spilling from Elena's basket. She had been walking back toward Blackwood Keep, quietly congratulating herself for making it through an entire morning without dropping anything important. Then she heard splashing. Now, two young wolf pups were fighting the current below the rocky bank. The older pup, dark gray and painfully determined, was trying to paddle towards shore while keeping one eye on his smaller brother. The little one was doing considerably worse. His round silver body vanished beneath the surface. Then his nose appeared. Then one paw. Then nothing. Elena dropped her basket. "Why are you just standing there?" The tall stranger slowly turned toward her. He wore black from throat to boots. Broad shoulders. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples. The kind of face that suggested smiling had once been considered and rejected as unnecessary. "They are learning," he said. Elena stared at him. A tiny head broke through the water again. "Learning what?" "How to drown politely." The man's eyes narrowed. Elena immediately knew she had probably insulted someone important. Unfortunately, the smaller pup sank again. Importance would have to wait. She kicked off one boot. The second refused to cooperate. "Oh, come on." She yanked harder, lost her balance, windmilled both arms, and nearly fell into the lake before she had officially decided to jump. The stranger reached toward her. Too late. Elena went over the bank with one boot on, one boot off, and absolutely none of the dignity she would later wish she had maintained. The water hit like ice. She surfaced gasping. This was a terrible plan. The older pup paddled toward her, clearly offended by the suggestion that he needed rescuing. "Fine. You're doing wonderfully." A wave rolled over his head. He vanished. Elena lunged forward and grabbed him beneath the chest. That was less wonderful. A frightened cry came from behind her. The smaller pup. Elena twisted around. He was barely above water now, paws striking the surface without rhythm. She reached him and pulled him against her. The pup immediately wrapped all four legs around her neck. Elena choked. "Sweetheart, I appreciate the affection." His grip tightened. "But you are currently helping me die." The older pup tried climbing onto her shoulder. "You too?" From the shore, several guards had appeared. Not one moved. They kept glancing nervously toward the black-clad stranger. Elena kicked toward the shallows, dragging two soaked princes she still believed were ordinary pups. By the time her knees struck stone, her hair covered half her face, her remaining boot was filling with water, and the smaller wolf had gone frighteningly limp. Elena's humor disappeared. "No. No. No. F." She carried him onto the shore and dropped to her knees. The stranger moved closer. Elena barely noticed. She placed the pup on his side and gently pressed, helping him cough. "Come on, little one." "Nothing." Her hands trembled. "Please." Then the pup jerked. He coughed violently. A stream of lake water shot from his mouth, directly across the polished black boots of the man standing over them. Silence. Absolute silence. The older pup blinked. One guard looked at the sky. Another suddenly became fascinated by a tree. Elena exhaled shakily. Good. She wiped water from the little pup's muzzle. You're breathing. Behind her, metal struck stone. Every guard dropped to one knee. Elena froze. Your Majesty. Slowly, painfully slowly, Elena lifted her eyes toward the soaked boots. Then the black cloak. Then the cold gray eyes of the man she had just accused of watching children drown. Alpha King Cassian Blackwood looked down at her. Elena swallowed. Oh. The little pup crawled straight into her lap. Cassian's expression changed. Not much, but enough. Because Prince Benji had never chosen a stranger before. For 3 full seconds, Elena forgot how knees worked. One moment, she was kneeling in wet grass, with a trembling wolf pup pressed against her chest. The next, every guard around Moonwater Basin had dropped to one knee. Your Majesty. The title traveled through Elena's mind slowly. Very slowly. She looked at the man's black cloak. Then at the silver crest fastened near his shoulder. Then, at his face. Then, unfortunately, at the lake water still dripping from Prince Benji's muzzle onto the Alpha King's boots. Oh, Elena whispered. Cassian Blackwood said nothing. That somehow made it worse. Elena attempted to stand. Her remaining boot squelched loudly. She slipped. Theo, still soaked from nose to tail, immediately pressed his small body against her arm as though helping. Elena caught herself before falling directly into the king. Thank you, she murmured to the pup. Theo lifted his chin with great dignity. Cassian stared at both of them. Benji chose that moment to cough again. Elena forgot royal etiquette instantly. She dropped back to her knees. All right, sweetheart. Easy. She rubbed slow circles between his shoulders. The little silver pup leaned into her hand. Cassian's jaw tightened. He took one step closer. Benji noticed. His ears flattened. Then, without hesitation, he crawled deeper into Elena's lap and buried his face against her wet dress. The movement was small. Cassian stopped anyway. Elena looked up. For the first time, she saw something beneath the Alpha King's cold expression. Not anger. Pain. It vanished almost immediately. They were not drowning, Cassian said. Elena blinked. She looked down at Benji. Then at Theo, whose fur hung against his narrow body in miserable wet spikes. Theo sneezed. Elena looked back at Cassian. They were doing a very convincing impression. One of the guards made a strange choking sound. Cassian turned his head. The guard suddenly became fascinated by a distant pine tree. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Wonderful. She had now insulted the Alpha King twice. Before breakfast. I apologize, Your Majesty. Cassian studied her. You do not sound apologetic. I'm working toward it. Theo made a soft sound that might have been a laugh. Cassian heard it. His eyes moved toward his eldest son. Theo immediately became serious again. Too serious. Elena noticed. That bothered her more than the king's stare. Cassian removed one glove. They were training. Elena glanced toward the water. Moonwater Basin no longer looked beautiful. The morning light caught on the fast-moving surface, silver and cold. Beyond the shallows, the current curled around black stones before disappearing beneath an old arched bridge. Training for what? Swimming. Elena looked at Benji. The little pup was still trembling. With respect, Your Majesty, I believe the water was winning. Cassian's expression hardened. This is how Blackwood heirs learn. There was no pride in the words. Only certainty. The kind passed from one generation to the next until no one remembered to question it. Cassian looked toward the lake. My father brought me here when I was 5. Elena remained quiet. He put me in the same current. And you learned? I survived. The answer came too quickly. Elena looked at him. Cassian seemed to realize what he had said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Then disappeared. Elena did not challenge him. Not yet. Instead, she pulled part of her soaked shawl around Benji. The pup sighed against her. Theo stepped closer too, pretending he only wanted the warmer patch of grass. Elena opened the shawl farther. Theo hesitated, then sat beside his brother. Cassian watched. You are encouraging them to stop shaking? To depend on you. Elena's hands paused. She lifted her eyes. They met me approximately 6 minutes ago. 7, Theo said quietly. Everyone looked at him. The 6-year-old prince lowered his ears. Elena's mouth twitched. Apparently 7. Benji gave a tiny snort. Cassian almost smiled. Almost. Then Elena saw the red mark. It circled Benji's front leg, just above the paw. Faint. Older than today. Her amusement faded. She carefully moved the wet fur aside. Benji flinched. Cassian noticed. What is it? Elena did not answer immediately. There was another mark beneath the fur. A narrow band of irritated skin. Not from rock. Not from a branch. Something had been tied there. Elena looked toward Theo. A similar mark showed near his ankle. Cassian followed her gaze. His face changed. The training straps? Elena asked gently. Cassian stared at the marks. We did not use straps today. Theo went very still. Across the basin, one of the royal trainers shifted his weight. Just slightly. Elena saw it. So did Cassian. The trainer was an older man with cropped gray hair and a blue cord around his shoulder. When Cassian looked toward him, the man lowered his eyes too late. Cassian's voice became quiet. Dangerously quiet. Captain Marrow. The trainer stepped forward. Your Majesty. Cassian pointed toward Theo's ankle. Explain that. Marrow hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. But a king who had survived wars knew what hesitation sounded like. Standard practice, Your Majesty. Cassian's gaze sharpened. On whose order? No answer. Theo suddenly pressed himself against Elena's side. Not Benji. Tao. The older brother who had spent the morning pretending he was afraid of nothing. Elena felt his small body tremble. Cassian saw it. And for the first time that morning, the Alpha King stopped looking at Elena as the problem. He looked at his own men. Take my sons inside, he said. Benji tightened his grip on Elena's dress. Cassian noticed. His voice lowered. She goes with them. Elena looked up in surprise. Then Cassian turned back toward Captain Marrow. The warmth left his face completely. And no one leaves this basin. Behind them, Theo whispered, so softly only Elena heard him. They'll say it was our fault. Elena looked down. Who will? Theo stared toward the trainers. His answer was barely a breath. The one's father doesn't know about. By the time Elena reached the royal changing room beside Moonwater Basin, she had lost her other boot. She did not know where. Possibly the lake. Possibly the path. Possibly somewhere between being ordered to accompany 2 royal princes and realizing she was still dripping across polished palace stone. At the moment, it felt unimportant. Benji had not let go of her. The little silver pup remained wrapped in a thick wool blanket against her chest, his damp nose pressed beneath her chin. Theo walked beside them in human form now, barefoot and wrapped in another blanket like a very offended burrito. He was trying to look dignified. The blanket had tiny embroidered ducks on it. Elena chose not to mention them. Behind them, Alpha King Cassian followed in silence. That silence had weight. Guards moved aside before him. Servants lowered their eyes. Even the fire seemed to crackle more carefully when he entered the room. Elena placed Benji on a cushioned bench near the hearth. There, she murmured. Warm, dry. No heroic drowning required. Benji gave her a suspicious look. Theo sat beside him. We weren't drowning. Elena turned. You were underwater. That happens when you swim. Usually less permanently. Theo frowned. Cassian's mouth moved. Barely. Elena saw it anyway. For half a second, she thought the Alpha King might have almost smiled. Then a servant entered, carrying a copper basin filled with steaming water. The sound changed everything. Water poured from a pitcher. Benji froze. His little body went rigid beneath the blanket. Elena noticed immediately. Benji. The servant continued pouring. Water struck metal. Benji's breathing became shallow. Theo looked at him. Stop. The servant did not hear. Cassian did. What is it? Theo's face closed. The servant poured another stream into the basin. Benji suddenly scrambled backward. The blanket fell. He dropped from the bench, crawled beneath the nearest table, and pressed himself against the wall. Benji. Cassian stepped forward. The child whimpered. Cassian stopped. Everyone in the room became still. Elena slowly lowered herself to the floor. Not near Benji. Not yet. She sat several feet from the table, soaked skirts pooling around her knees. Cassian looked at her. What are you doing? Nothing. His brow tightened. You are sitting on the floor. Yes. In wet clothes. Yes. That seems unwise. Elena glanced down. I have made several unwise choices this morning. Theo covered his mouth. Cassian looked at him. The boy immediately became fascinated by the ducks on his blanket. Elena returned her attention to Benji. She did not reach beneath the table. She did not tell him to come out. She simply rested her hands in her lap. I'm staying here, she said softly. Benji's frightened eyes watched her from the shadows. Cassian's voice lowered. He must learn not to hide from fear. Elena looked up at him. Maybe. Cassian's expression hardened slightly. But first, she continued, he needs to know he's allowed to be afraid without being punished for it. The room went quiet. Cassian said nothing. Neither did Theo. Several minutes passed. Then Benji moved. One hand appeared first. Then his head. He crawled toward Elena and climbed into her lap without looking at his father. Elena wrapped the blanket around him. Cassian watched every movement. Something in his face tightened again. Not anger. Something lonelier. Elena felt it, though she did not understand it. She rubbed Benji's back until his breathing slowed. Then she noticed Theo watching the water basin. Not fearfully. Carefully. Like someone measuring danger. Elena turned to him. Do you hate water too? Theo shook his head. I can swim. I know. He straightened. I'm good at it. You are. That surprised him. Elena added, you are also trying to keep Benji above water. Theo looked down. Cassian's gaze sharpened. What? Theo did not answer. Cassian stepped closer. Theo. The boy's shoulders stiffened. Elena noticed the change immediately. Theo was not afraid of his father. Not exactly. He was afraid of disappointing him. That was different. Sometimes worse. Cassian crouched. His voice softened. Look at me. Theo did. What happened at the basin? Training. What kind? Theo hesitated. Cassian looked at the red mark around his ankle. Who used the straps? Theo's eyes flicked toward the door. Elena followed the glance. No one stood there now. Still, Theo looked as if someone might be listening. Cassian saw that too. Theo. The boy swallowed. We're better when you aren't there. Cassian went completely still. Elena felt Benji's fingers tighten around her sleeve. Cassian's voice became quieter. Better? Theo nodded once. Why? The boy stared at the floor. Elena did not interrupt. Cassian waited. Finally, Theo whispered, because when you're there, they stop. Cassian's face changed. Stop what? Theo immediately regretted speaking. Elena could see it. His mouth closed. Cassian's patience thinned. They. The boy flinched. Benji buried his face against Elena. Elena looked at Cassian. Maybe don't sound like a battlefield. Cassian turned his eyes toward her. For one dangerous second, Elena wondered whether she had finally used up all available royal mercy. Then, he exhaled slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Tell me. Theo looked at his father. They make it longer. Cassian's brow furrowed. The swimming? Theo nodded. And other things. What other things? Silence. Cassian's jaw tightened. Elena saw him force himself not to demand more. That effort mattered. Theo noticed too. After a moment, he whispered, night practice. Cassian stared at him. There's no night practice. Theo finally looked up. Yes, there is. The words seemed to strike the room harder than a shout. Cassian stood very slowly. Benji began trembling again. Elena held him closer. Cassian looked toward the door. Then back at Theo. Who takes you? Theo's lips parted. Before he could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Not hurried. Measured. The same calm rhythm as someone who already knew exactly what had been said. Theo went pale. And for the first time, Elena understood something that made the cold lake outside feel warm by comparison. The boys were not afraid of learning to swim. They were afraid of the people who taught them when their father was gone. The footsteps stopped outside the changing room. Theo's fingers tightened around the edge of his blanket. Benji went still in Elena's arms. Cassian noticed both reactions. That was enough. Stay here, he said. His voice was calm again. Too calm. Elena had begun to understand that the quieter Alpha King Cassian Blackwood became, the more sensible it was for everyone else to reconsider their life choices. He opened the door. A royal clerk stood outside holding several leather folders. The man bowed quickly. Your Majesty. You requested the prince's training records. Cassian looked at the folders. Then at the empty hallway behind him. Yes. The clerk swallowed. They were brought directly from the council archive. Cassian took them. Directly? Yes, Your Majesty. The hesitation was tiny. Elena noticed it anyway. So did Cassian. He closed the door. Then he carried the records to a long table beside the fire. Theo stayed close to Elena. Benji had finally stopped trembling, though one small hand remained wrapped around her sleeve. Cassian opened the first folder. Swimming practice. Balance exercises. Controlled shifting. Nothing unusual. He turned another page. Morning instruction only. No nighttime sessions. No restraint straps. No extended water drills. Cassian read faster. His face grew colder with every page. Elena watched him quietly. Finally he said, according to these records, my sons have never trained after sunset. Theo looked at the floor. Cassian lifted his eyes. But you have. Theo nodded. How often? The boy hesitated. Elena felt Benji shift closer. Cassian caught himself before pressing. That mattered. He lowered his voice. You do not have to answer now. Theo looked up, surprised. Cassian seemed equally surprised by his own words. Elena pretended not to notice. Sometimes people changed better when no one applauded too loudly. A servant brought dry clothing for Elena. She accepted it gratefully, then stared at the folded dress. Is there a problem? Cassian asked. Elena looked down at herself. Then at him. I'm trying to remember where I left my second boot. Theo pointed toward the window. The lake. Elena sighed. Of course it is. Benji made a tiny laughing sound. Cassian's eyes moved toward Elena. For one brief moment, the anger left his face. You entered Moonwater Basin wearing only one boot. I entered with two. Cassian raised an eyebrow. The lake disagreed. Theo laughed properly this time. Even Cassian's mouth almost softened. Almost. An hour later, after the princes had been taken to the warm nursery under Cassian's personal guard, Elena returned to Moonwater Basin. Officially, she wanted her herb basket. Unofficially, she wanted her boot. She found neither immediately. Instead, she found mud. A great deal of it. Elena. She turned. Cassian stood several yards behind her. She straightened so quickly that her foot slid. He caught her elbow before she went down. For 1 second, neither moved. His hand was warm. Very warm. Elena became strangely aware of that. Cassian seemed to notice too. He released her carefully. You fall often. Only when observed. I have observed you for less than half a day. And already you understand my burden. Something almost amused passed through his eyes. Then Elena saw metal beneath the mud. She crouched. A small buckle lay half buried near the waterline. Cassian's expression changed. Elena picked it up. Leather still clung to one side. Training strap? Cassian took it from her. Yes. The metal bore the Blackwood crest. Fresh scratches marked the edge. Not old. Not forgotten. Elena looked toward the lake. A second piece of leather hung from a low branch. Someone had trained children here recently. More harshly than the records claimed. A guard approached from the path. He was older, with a scar across one cheek. His eyes moved toward the buckle. Then quickly away. Cassian noticed. You know something. The guard stiffened. No, Your Majesty. Elena watched his hands. One thumb rubbed nervously over the other. Cassian stepped closer. Look at me. The guard obeyed. I asked whether you know something. Silence stretched. Finally the man whispered. Some traditions survive. Because people don't ask questions. Cassian's face hardened. Elena looked at him. Some things survive because everyone is afraid to. The guard's eyes shifted toward the upper path. Someone was coming. An older man descended slowly from the stone steps. Silver hair. Straight shoulders. Dark blue council cloak. He carried no weapon. He did not need one. Cassian's expression became unreadable. Lord Garan. Elena recognized the name. Gahan Vos. First elder of the Royal Council. The man who had trained Cassian himself. Garan looked at the buckle in Cassian's hand. Then at Elena. His smile was polite. Too polite. So he said, This is the Omega who rescued the princes. Elena bowed. Your lordship. You acted bravely. I acted before thinking. I had heard that as well. Cassian's gaze sharpened. Garan ignored it. He studied Elena with calm curiosity. You saw two frightened children. Yes. And you assumed fear meant danger. Elena frowned. Sometimes it does. Garan looked toward Moonwater Basin. When I trained Cassian, fear meant progress. Cassian went still. Garan continued. He cried the first time his father put him in that water. Elena looked at Cassian. He did not look back. Garen's voice remained almost gentle. I ignored it. The wind moved across the lake. Cassian finally spoke. And you are proud of that? Garen met his eyes. No. A pause. I am proud of what survived. Something changed in Cassian's face. Garen stepped closer. You survived, didn't you? Elena felt the question land harder than any accusation. Cassian looked toward the water. For several seconds, he said nothing. And Elena realized the real danger at Moonwater Basin was not hidden beneath the surface. It was the belief that surviving pain made the pain necessary. That night, Alpha King Cassian Blackwood returned to Moonwater Basin alone. No guards followed him. No councilmen waited beneath the arches. Even the palace lights were distant from here, small golden squares against the dark hillside. The lake was almost black beneath the moon. Cold wind moved across the surface. Cassian stood at the same stone ledge where he had watched his sons struggle that morning. For years, he had remembered this place with pride. Tonight something felt different. He was 5 again, small, barefoot, terrified. His father had stood behind him. King Alaric Blackwood had been a man who believed hesitation was a disease. Cassian remembered looking down at the water. I can't. His father had answered immediately. You will. Then came the push. The freezing water. The panic. The terrible feeling of sinking while everyone watched. Cassian remembered swallowing water. Remembered clawing at stone. Remembered finally dragging himself onto the bank, coughing so hard his ribs hurt. His father had looked down at him. No embrace. No relief. Only one word. Again. Cassian closed his eyes. For more than 40 years, he had called that memory training. He had never called it fear. Footsteps sounded behind him. Cassian turned. Elena stood several yards away, carrying 2 steaming cups. She looked mildly annoyed. I was told kings do not wander around freezing lakes alone after midnight. Cassian stared at her. Who told you that? No one. She held up 1 cup. It simply seemed inefficient. Despite himself, Cassian almost smiled. You should be asleep. So should you. I am king. That sounds exhausting. She approached carefully and handed him the cup. Warm apple tea. Cassian looked at it. You brought this for me? I brought 2. That was not my question. Elena suddenly became interested in the lake. You looked cold earlier. Something in his chest tightened. She had noticed. Cassian was accustomed to people noticing his temper, his victories, his crown. Not whether he was cold. He took the cup. Thank you. They stood in silence. Elena did not ask why he was there. That made him want to tell her. My father put me into this lake when I was 5. She looked toward him. Cassian continued. I could not swim. Elena said nothing. He believed instinct would teach me faster than instruction. Did it? Cassian watched the dark water. Yes. A pause. And no. Elena waited. Cassian looked down at the tea in his hands. I learned to swim. Her voice was quiet. What else did you learn? The question unsettled him. He had commanded armies. He had negotiated surrender from men who hated him. Yet this Omega with damp hair and a habit of losing footwear could ask one simple question and leave him without armor. That no one was coming. Elena's expression softened. Cassian regretted saying it immediately. Not because it was untrue. Because it was too true. He looked away. Elena did not offer pity. For that, he was grateful. Instead, she sipped her tea. That seems like a very heavy thing for a 5-year-old to learn. Cassian's throat tightened. Before he could answer, a small sneeze came from behind the stone wall. Both adults turned. Theo stood there in his nightshirt. Benji peeked from behind him clutching a blanket. Cassian stared. What are you doing outside? Theo straightened. Walking. At midnight? Yes. In bare feet? Theo looked down. That part was less planned. Elena covered a smile. Benji hurried toward her. Cassian frowned. Elena is not your personal blanket. Benji hugged her leg. She's warmer. Cassian looked offended by this deeply unfair comparison. Elena bit her lip. Theo failed entirely and laughed. Within minutes, the 4 of them were sitting near the shallow edge. Elena had brought a floating piece of cork earlier that afternoon. She placed it on the water. Benji immediately moved backward. That's all right, she said. No swimming tonight. Cassian frowned. Then why bring them here? Elena looked at him. So, the lake stops being the place where bad things happen. Cassian went quiet. Benji eventually sat on the lowest stone. His toes touched the water. He pulled them back. Then tried again. No one ordered him farther. Cassian watched. After several minutes, Benji smiled. Just a little. Theo joined him. Then splashed water toward his brother. Benji squealed. Cassian's body tensed instinctively. Elena noticed. Your Majesty. He looked at her. They're laughing. Cassian listened. She was right. The sound carried across Moonwater Basin. Light. Uncontrolled. Alive. It had been years since this place had sounded like that. Benji suddenly splashed too hard. Water struck Cassian's trousers. He stared down. Theo froze. Elena covered her mouth. Benji looked horrified. Cassian slowly lifted his eyes. For one long second, everyone waited. Then Cassian reached down. He splashed Benji back. The little prince gasped. Theo laughed so hard he almost slipped. Elena stared at Cassian. And Cassian realized he liked the way she looked at him when she forgot he was king. Then Theo's laughter faded. He stared at the water. Cassian noticed. What is it? Theo hesitated. Elena did not rush him. Finally, the boy whispered. Lord Garen says we have to stay until we stop being afraid. Cassian's expression changed. How long does that take? Theo looked at him. Sometimes until morning. Cassian went still. Benji lowered his head. Theo continued in a small voice. I hold him up when he gets tired. Cassian looked at his youngest son. Then, at the dark lake. Something inside him broke quietly. How many times? Theo swallowed. I don't know. Cassian's voice weakened. How many, Theo? The boy looked away. I stopped counting. The warm cup in Cassian's hand suddenly felt very cold. And for the first time in his life, he understood that surviving a tradition did not mean his sons should have to survive it too. Lord Garen Voss arrived in the council chamber before sunrise. He was not summoned twice. Men like Garen rarely needed reminders. He entered wearing the same dark blue council cloak he had worn beside Moonwater Basin, his silver hair combed neatly back, his expression calm enough to irritate anyone already angry. Cassian stood near the long windows. He had not slept. Elena knew because she had seen him leave the lake after midnight, with both boys wrapped in blankets beneath his arms. Theo had fallen asleep against one shoulder. Benji had drooled on the other. Cassian had pretended not to notice. Elena had. She had also noticed that he had carried them all the way back instead of calling servants. Now she stood near the rear wall because Cassian had insisted she remain. She had protested. "I grow herbs, Your Majesty. You also witnessed enough to matter." That sounded almost complimentary. It was not intended to. Elena had looked at him. Cassian had looked away first. That small victory had entertained her for nearly 7 minutes. Now there was nothing amusing in the room. Garen bowed. "My king." Cassian did not return the greeting. "Did you train my sons without my order?" No introduction. No ceremony. Garen's eyes flicked briefly toward Elena, then back to Cassian. "I prepared the heirs." "That was not my question. It is my answer." The silence sharpened. Cassian stepped away from the window. "You took 2 children to Moonwater Basin after dark." "Yes." "You restrained them." "When necessary." Elena's fingers tightened around the edge of her sleeve. Cassian's face remained still. That frightened her more than shouting would have. "You kept them there until morning." "Sometimes." Cassian stopped several feet from Garen. "Why?" Garen looked genuinely surprised. "To make them strong." Something cold moved through Cassian's eyes. "They are 6 and 4. They are Blackwoods. They are children. They are heirs." The words struck each other like steel. Elena watched Cassian carefully. This was not simply a king confronting a disobedient elder. This was a man confronting the person who had helped shape every rule inside his head. Garen softened his voice. "Marielle loved them deeply." Cassian went still. Elena immediately disliked the direction of the conversation. Garen continued. "She gave them comfort when they needed discipline." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Do not speak of my wife. I respected your Luna." "You are speaking of her as though kindness were a defect." Garen paused, then said quietly, "After she died, the boys became softer." Elena felt anger rise in her chest. She forced it down. This was Cassian's battle. Garen stepped closer. The court noticed. Cassian's gaze sharpened. The court? Other alphas. The border lords. Men who may one day test Theo because they smell hesitation. He is 6. And one day he will not be. Cassian said nothing. Garen's tone became almost paternal. "I did for your sons what I once did for you." There it was. The invisible chain. Elena saw it land. Cassian looked away for half a second. Garen noticed. "You remember what you were like." Cassian's shoulders stiffened. "You were afraid of the water." Silence. "You cried the first night." Elena's heart tightened. Cassian's face went completely blank. Garen continued. "You begged your father to take you home." "Enough." "But you returned." "I said enough." "And eventually, you stopped crying." Cassian turned toward him. His voice was low. "I stopped because I learned no one cared whether I did." Garen did not flinch. "And it made you king." Elena closed her eyes briefly. There were cruel words. Then there were cruel beliefs spoken as wisdom. Cassian stared at the man before him. For years, Garen had taught him sword work, strategy, control. He had stood beside Cassian at his coronation. He had carried young Cassian from a battlefield when an arrow broke through his shoulder. He had been mentor, commander, almost family. That was what made this harder. Cassian finally spoke. "You believe pain made me strong. I believe surviving it did. And therefore, my sons should survive the same. They need what you had." Cassian's voice changed. "I remember what I had." For the first time, Garen hesitated. Only slightly. But Elena saw it. Cassian stepped closer. "I had a father who watched me choke." Garen's mouth tightened. "I had teachers who called fear weakness. Fear becomes weakness when obeyed." No. The word came from Elena. Everyone turned. She immediately regretted having a mouth. Garen looked at her with mild amusement. The Omega has an opinion. Elena swallowed. Cassian's eyes rested on her. Not warning. Permission. So, she continued. Fear becomes dangerous when children learn they must hide it from the people protecting them. Garen smiled faintly. You know little about raising kings. That is true. Elena glanced toward Cassian. I do know what frightened children look like. Cassian's expression shifted. Garen noticed that too. And now they run to you. They run to whoever makes them feel safe. Elena wished, immediately, that she had chosen softer words. Cassian looked down. Garen almost smiled. But Cassian surprised them both. They should have been running to me. The admission landed quietly. Elena's anger softened. Cassian looked toward Garen. I should have known. You were ruling a kingdom. I was their father first. Garen's expression hardened. Then decide carefully what kind of father you intend to become. Cassian held his gaze. For a long moment, Elena thought he might order Garen arrested. He did not. Not yet. Leave. Garen bowed. Before turning, he looked at Elena. Only once. It was enough to make her skin tighten. Then he was gone. Elena remained silent until the chamber doors closed. Cassian stood with his back to her. You think I should have arrested him? Elena considered lying. I think you wanted to. Cassian looked over his shoulder. And you? She approached slowly. I don't think you have to decide tonight what he was to you. Cassian's eyes stayed on hers. And what do I decide? Elena stopped beside him. What he is to your sons. Cassian stared at her. Then at the closed doors. For once, the Alpha King had no answer. And strangely, Elena thought that might be the first honest place to begin. 3 mornings later, Moonwater Basin looked almost peaceful. Almost. Elena Wren stood ankle-deep in the shallows holding a long piece of cork tied to a rope. Benji sat on a flat stone several feet away and regarded the water with deep suspicion. Theo stood beside him. You look scared, Theo said. I'm not. You're holding the bench. Benji looked down. Both hands were gripping the edge. I like the bench. Elena smiled. The bench is honored. Theo snorted. Benji frowned at his brother. I can swim. No, you can panic beautifully. Though. Elena gave him a look. He hid. Sorry. Benji stared at the water again. Elena did not hurry him. That had become her rule. No pulling. No forcing. No counting backward from 3 as if fear became more polite when given a schedule. Just waiting. Behind them, boots moved over stone. Benji immediately turned. Cassian approached, without guards. He wore a simple black shirt instead of ceremonial armor, though somehow, he still looked like a man who could command an army before breakfast. Theo straightened. Benji loosened his grip on the bench. Elena noticed both. Good morning, Your Majesty. Cassian looked at the cork. What is that? A highly advanced royal training device. He studied it. It is a piece of cork. Yes. Attached to rope. Your powers of observation remain terrifying. Theo laughed. Cassian looked at Elena. She became very interested in adjusting the knot. I meant that respectfully. No, you did not. No. Something warmer passed through his eyes. He stepped closer to the water. Benji immediately called, Papa. Cassian's attention shifted. Yes? Are you staying? The question was so simple that Elena almost missed the weight inside it. Cassian did not. I am. Benji nodded. Then looked back at the water. Elena lowered the cork onto the surface. You don't have to swim today. Theo groaned. Again? Again. How will he learn if he never goes in? Elena looked at him. How did you learn? Theo opened his mouth. Then closed it. Cassian looked toward his eldest son. Theo stared at the lake. With straps. The morning seemed colder. Elena softened her voice. Then perhaps we try something else. She sat on the lowest stone and put both feet into the water. Benji watched. Nothing happened. No one grabbed him. No one ordered him forward. After a while, He climbed down beside her. One toe entered. Then another. His shoulders remained tight. Cassian watched from behind them. Benji glanced back. "You're too far." Cassian frowned. "I am 6 feet away." Benji considered this. Too far. Elena looked at Cassian. Cassian looked at Elena. Then, at the water. "No." Elena blinked. "I did not say anything. You were about to." "I was thinking." Loudly. Theo covered a grin. Benji pointed toward the shallows. "Come." Cassian stared at his son as though he had just been ordered into battle by a 4-year-old. Elena turned away to hide her smile. Cassian noticed. "You find this amusing." "Not at all. You are smiling. The morning is beautiful." "It is cloudy." "Very beautiful clouds." Theo gave up and laughed. Cassian exhaled slowly. Then he removed his boots. Elena stopped smiling. She had not expected him to agree. Cassian rolled his trousers to his knees and stepped into the water. Benji's entire face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. His shoulders lowered. Cassian noticed that too. He moved closer. Benji reached for the cork. Elena held the rope loosely. "That's it." Benji stepped deeper. Water reached his knees. Then his waist. His breathing changed. Elena saw the fear returning. Cassian did too. "Stand straight," he said automatically. Benji stiffened. "Control your breathing." The little boy's hands tightened. "Benji." Cassian's voice sharpened. Elena quietly said, "Cassian." Everything stopped. Theo's eyes widened. Elena's own heart nearly stopped. She had just used the Alpha King's first name. No title. No permission. Wonderful. Cassian looked at her. She swallowed. "Your Majesty." Too late. His gaze remained on hers. Elena lowered her voice. "He knows what to do." Cassian looked toward Benji. "He is panicking." "Yes. So, I should help him." "You are." Cassian frowned. "By saying less." Theo made a tiny coughing sound that suspiciously resembled laughter. Cassian ignored him. Elena moved closer to Benji. "Look at your father." Benji did. Cassian's expression softened almost unwillingly. Elena whispered, "You don't have to beat the water." Benji's breathing remained fast. "Let it hold you." "I'll sink." "No." "How do you know?" Elena looked at Cassian. "Because your father is right there." Cassian went very still. Benji looked at him. "Papa." Cassian lowered himself until the water reached his chest. "I'm here." Benji's fingers slowly loosened around the cork. His body tilted backward. For one frightening second, panic flashed across his face. Cassian moved. Elena touched his arm. "Wait." Cassian looked at her hand. Then at Benji. The little prince kicked once. Then stopped. His back touched the surface. The water held him. Benji's eyes widened. "I'm floating." Theo shouted. "You're floating." Benji laughed. Not nervously. Not carefully. He laughed so hard his body tilted sideways, and he grabbed the cork again. "I did it." Cassian smiled. Actually smiled. Elena started. She had seen him angry, cold, tired, worried. She had never seen this. It changed his entire face. For one strange second, Elena forgot about the water, the princes, and the fact that she was holding a rope. Cassian caught her looking. His smile faded slightly. Not completely. Elena looked away too fast. Her foot slipped. She fell forward. Cassian caught her around the waist before her face hit the lake. Theo burst into laughter. Benji clapped. Elena froze in Cassian's arms. His face was suddenly much closer than necessary. Water moved softly around them. Cassian's hand remained at her waist. Elena's heart did something deeply unprofessional. "I had that," she whispered. Cassian glanced at the water. "You absolutely did not." Theo laughed harder. Cassian released her slowly. Too slowly. Elena stepped away and pretended the warmth in her face came from physical exertion. It did not. From the high stone balcony above Moonwater Basin, Lord Garenvoss watched them. Benji laughing. Theo relaxed. Cassian standing beside an omega as though he had forgotten the distance between king and servant. Garen's expression did not change. But when he turned away, he called one of the council guards closer. "Prepare the old records," he said quietly. The guard hesitated. "All of them?" Garen looked back once at the lake. "At Elena." "Yes." Then his voice became colder. "And find out how long she intends to stay." By breakfast, the palace had already decided Elena Wren was dangerous, not because she carried a weapon, not because she had broken a law, and certainly not because anyone had ever seen her successfully intimidate another living creature. Elena had once apologized to a chair after walking into it. Still, rumors traveled faster than reason. By the time she entered the herb garden, 2 servants stopped talking. A noblewoman near the fountain looked Elena up and down, then whispered something to her companion. Both women laughed. Elena continued walking. She had learned long ago that insults became heavier only when carried home. What bothered her was not the laughter. It was the silence. People who usually greeted her now looked away. Master Holland, the head gardener, stood beside the rosemary beds holding a folded order. "Elena." His expression made her stop. "What happened?" He gave her the paper. "You've been reassigned." She read it. "Lower laundry hall. Night rotation. No access to royal gardens. No access to Moonwater Basin without direct authorization." Elena looked up. "Why?" Holland lowered his voice. "I was told your presence near the princes is becoming disruptive." "Disruptive?" He looked embarrassed. That was the polite word. Elena folded the order carefully. For some reason, that hurt more than she expected. 3 days ago, she had only wanted to gather fever root without falling into anything. Now, she was apparently a threat to royal stability. "Do I still get lunch?" Holland blinked. "Yes." "Then civilization survives." His mouth twitched. Elena turned away before he could see that her smile did not quite reach her eyes. Across the courtyard, someone was watching. Cassian stood beneath the eastern arch. He had come looking for her. He told himself it was because Benji had asked whether Elena would attend the afternoon lesson. Theo had asked too. Cassian had absolutely not walked across half the palace simply because Elena had not appeared at breakfast. That would have been ridiculous. Then he saw the reassignment order in her hand. His expression changed. A young guard approached Elena carrying a basket she had forgotten beside the path. "Miss Wren." Elena turned. "Oh, thank you, Daniel." The guard smiled. "You would lose your own hands if they weren't attached." "Unfair. You lost 2 boots this week. One was taken by the lake." Daniel laughed. Cassian's jaw tightened. He did not know why. Daniel was 27. Competent. Respectful. Possessed an irritatingly easy smile. Cassian walked toward them. Daniel noticed first. His back straightened immediately. "Your Majesty." Elena turned. Something warm moved through her expression before she hid it. Cassian noticed that too. "Guard Daniel." "Yes, Your Majesty? Should you not be at your post?" Daniel hesitated. "My rotation ended 10 minutes ago." Cassian looked at him. "Then enjoy your rest." Daniel understood dismissal when he heard it. He bowed and left. Elena watched him go. Then looked at Cassian. "You frightened him." "I spoke to him." "You spoke to him like he had stolen state secrets." Cassian's expression remained perfectly calm. He was standing around. "He returned my basket." "Heroic." Elena stared at him. Cassian realized, too late, that he sounded ridiculous. Her mouth curved. "Your Majesty." "What? Were you jealous of my herb basket?" "No." "Good." She started walking. Cassian followed. "Why would I be jealous?" "I said good." "You implied something." "I implied nothing." "You smiled." "I do that occasionally." Cassian frowned. Elena's smile widened. For several steps, neither spoke. Then Cassian noticed the reassignment order again. "Who gave you that?" The humor left her face. "The administrative office." Cassian held out his hand. Elena gave him the paper. He read it once. Then again. The royal seal at the bottom belonged to the council secretariat, not the crown, not him. Cassian folded the order. You are not being reassigned. Elena, the terrifying gardener, lives another day. Cassian looked at her. They are trying to isolate you. Her smile disappeared. Why? Because the boys trust you. That seems like a poor reason. It is an excellent reason if someone wants them silent. That afternoon, Cassian ordered every training record involving Theo and Benji brought to the council chamber. 3 hours later, an archivist arrived pale and trembling. One volume is missing, Your Majesty. Cassian stood. Which volume? Moonwater training logs. Last winter through early spring. Elena was seated near the window, sorting copies of medical notes. She looked up. Missing? The archivist swallowed. There was a small fire in the West Archive. Cassian's eyes narrowed. When? Last night. Elena exchanged a look with him. They went together. The West Archive smelled faintly of smoke. A blackened table stood beneath an open window. Ash had been scattered across the floor. Cassian crouched near it. Elena touched 2 fingers to the gray powder. Still warm. She smelled it, then frowned. What? Cassian asked. This isn't parchment. The archivist stared. Elena rubbed the ash between her fingers. Mostly straw. Maybe old cloth. Cassian slowly stood. Someone had staged the fire. Someone wanted them to believe the records were gone. That evening, Elena went to check on Theo and Benji. Their nursery was unusually quiet. Benji sat near the fireplace, hugging his wooden wolf. Theo was pretending to read. Neither looked relaxed. Elena crouched. What happened? Benji looked toward the door, then whispered, They're doing the final one. Theo's head snapped up. Benji. Elena's stomach tightened. The final what? Benji lowered his voice. The trial. Theo stood. It's nothing. Theo. He looked at Elena. Fear filled his face. Not for himself. For Benji. Elena heard footsteps outside. Then a metallic click. She turned. The nursery door had just been locked from the other side. Benji whispered, Tomorrow. Elena walked toward the door. Her pulse quickened. Who said that? Theo swallowed. The attendant. Elena tried the handle. Locked. Behind her, Benji's small voice shook. They said father doesn't need to know. The nursery door opened just before dawn. Not because anyone came to release them. Because Theo had been quietly working the old window latch with a wooden spoon for nearly 20 minutes. Elena watched him from across the room. Should I ask? No. Is this something princes are taught? No. Good. I was worried royal education had become very creative. Theo gave the latch one final push. It snapped open. Cold air rushed into the nursery. Benji stared at him. You broke it. Theo looked offended. It was already weak. Elena raised one eyebrow. The spoon disagrees. For the first time all night, Benji smiled. Then footsteps sounded outside. All 3 went silent. A key turned in the nursery door. Elena stood. Too late. 2 attendants entered with a royal guard. Their expressions were polite. Too polite. The princes are required in the East Hall. Theo's face drained of color. Elena moved in front of him. By whose order? The taller attendant looked at her. Council instruction. That was not my question. His smile disappeared. You are not required to accompany them. Benji immediately grabbed Elena's skirt. Yes, she is. The guard hesitated. The attendant did not. He stepped forward. Theo suddenly spoke. We'll go. Elena turned. Theo was looking at her carefully. Too carefully. Then his eyes dropped toward the floor. Once. Twice. A signal. Elena understood only after they were gone. Theo wanted her to notice the trail. She waited until the footsteps disappeared. Then ran. Or attempted to. Her first 3 steps were impressive. The 4th caught on the edge of a rug. Elena stumbled into the hallway wall. Excellent. She pushed herself upright and hurried toward the king's chambers. Cassian was already awake. Of course he was. Kings apparently considered sleep a personal weakness. He opened the door wearing a black shirt, no coat, hair slightly disordered. Elena stopped. For one completely inappropriate second, she forgot why she had come. Cassian noticed. What happened? That helped. The boys. His entire face changed. What about them? They took them. Cassian moved instantly. Who? 2 attendants. 1 guard. They said council orders. Cassian's eyes went cold. I gave no order. I know. He looked at her sharply. How? Elena swallowed. You are frightening when you give orders. A pause. Cassian almost smiled. Then he was king again. Within minutes, the palace erupted. Guards searched corridors. Stable gates were sealed. The east road was closed. Cassian questioned every servant on duty. Nothing. No one had seen the princes leave. That was when Elena went back to the nursery. Cassian followed. What are you looking for? Theo. He is not here. I know. Elena crouched near the doorway. He wanted me to follow. Cassian went still. On the stone floor lay a small wet footprint, then another. Benji's prints. Elena knew them because his left foot turned slightly inward when he was frightened. She followed the marks through a servant's corridor. Cassian stayed beside her. At one corner, she found a tiny strip of blue cloth caught on a nail. Theo's nightshirt. He left this. Cassian touched the cloth. His hand tightened. They continued. The trail led outside. Across wet grass. Downhill. Toward Moonwater Basin. Cassian's face became stone. No. Elena looked at him. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to a memory. They ran. This time Elena managed almost 30 yards before slipping in mud. Cassian caught her elbow. Again. She looked at him. This is becoming embarrassing. Becoming? Your Majesty. Ladder. He did not release her hand immediately. Neither mentioned it. Then they heard voices. Moonwater Basin appeared beyond the trees. Torches burned around the old training platform. Lord Garen stood near the water with 4 elders and several royal trainers. Theo was already in the lake. A leather strap circled his waist. He was swimming against the current. Benji stood barefoot on the stone ledge. Terrified, Cassian stopped breathing. Garen turned. You came. Cassian walked forward. Every guard lowered his eyes. What are you doing? The final trial. I abolished no such permission because I never gave it. Garen remained calm. You would have refused. Yes. That is why the council acted. Cassian's wolf surfaced beneath his skin. Elena felt it in the air. The guards did too. Garen continued. If you stop this now, they will remember fear forever. Cassian looked at Theo struggling in the current. Then at Benji. No. Garen frowned. Cassian stepped closer. They will remember their father came. Benji's face crumpled. Papa. Cassian moved toward him. One of the trainers grabbed the rope connected to Theo. At the same moment, Benji stepped backward. His heel caught beneath an old training strap. The leather snapped tight. Elena saw it first. Benji. The little prince lost his balance. Cassian lunged. Too late. Benji fell from the stone ledge. His small body struck the rushing water below. Elena's scream disappeared beneath the crash of the current. Theo turned. Benji. Without hesitation, the 6-year-old tore against his own restraint and threw himself toward his brother. Cassian reached the edge. For one terrible second, both his sons vanished beneath the water. And this time, no one could pretend it was training. Cassian jumped before anyone could stop him. 1 second, he stood on the stone ledge. The next, the Alpha King disappeared into the rushing water after his sons. Elena ran along the bank. Benji. No answer. Only white water crashed against the rocks. Theo surfaced first. He coughed, twisted, and looked wildly around. Benji. His restraint rope had torn loose, but part of the leather still dragged behind him. Cassian reached Theo. Stay with me. No, Benji. Then a small silver head broke through the current 20 feet downstream. Benji gasped. His paws struck the surface. Once, twice. Then panic took over. He began fighting the water exactly as he had the first morning. Too fast. Too hard. Elena's heart stopped. Cassian pushed away from Theo. Benji. The boy heard his father. For half a second, he looked toward him. Then another wave rolled over his face. He vanished. Cassian swam harder. Elena ran beside the current, slipping on wet stones. Garen shouted something behind her. She ignored him. Benji surfaced again. Closer to the narrow channel. Too close. Cassian was still several yards away. Elena suddenly remembered the lesson. The cork. The shallow water. Benji's frightened voice. I'll sink. And her answer. Because your father is right there. Elena cupped both hands around her mouth. Bangy. The pup turned toward her voice. Don't fight it. Cassian looked toward Elena. She pointed at Benji. Let him remember. Every instinct in Cassian's body screamed to reach his child immediately. To grab him. To pull him out. To control the water. Because he could not control his fear. Then he saw Benji's face. Terrified. Searching. Elena. Benji cried. I'm here. His legs thrashed again. Elena shook her head. No beating the water. Benji sobbed. I can't. Yes, you can. Cassian slowed. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Benji looked toward him. Papa. Cassian's chest nearly broke. I'm here. The same words from 3 mornings earlier. Only now the water was deeper. The danger was real. Benji's breathing came in sharp, frightened bursts. Cassian forced his voice to remain steady. Look at me. Benji did. Let the water hold you. The boy shook his head. Cassian moved closer, but did not grab him. You learned this. I'm scared. I know. The words surprised everyone. Especially Cassian. He had never heard his father say them. He had never been allowed to say them himself. Cassian reached one hand toward his son. Not touching. Just there. You can be scared. Benji stared at him. And still float. Something changed. Very slowly, Benji stopped kicking. His little body tilted backward. The current carried him several feet. Elena stopped breathing. Then Benji's back rose to the surface. His face stayed above water. He floated. Cassian laughed once. A broken, disbelieving sound. That's it? Benji's eyes widened. I'm doing it. Yes. Theo swam toward him from the side. I'm coming. Benji turned his head. Theo. Don't move. I'm not. You're moving. The water is doing it. Even now, Elena almost laughed. Theo reached his brother and slipped one arm beneath him. Benji immediately grabbed his neck. Theo coughed. Not so tight. Elena called from shore. He has experience with that. For one absurd second, Theo laughed. Cassian reached both boys. This time, he did not drag them from the water. He simply placed one hand behind Benji's back and the other beneath Theo's arm. Together, they moved toward shore. When Cassian's boots finally touched stone, Benji climbed onto him like a frightened squirrel. Cassian held him tightly. Too tightly. Benji squeaked, Papa. Cassian loosened his grip by approximately half an inch. Theo stood beside them, shivering. Cassian pulled him in too. For several seconds, the Alpha King said nothing. He simply held both sons. Elena turned away. Not because she did not want to see. Because the moment felt private. Then Benji whispered, I floated. Cassian closed his eyes. Yes, you did. I didn't drown. No. Theo looked at his father. He remembered Elena's lesson. Cassian's gaze found her. She stood 20 feet away, soaked at the hem, mud across one knee, hair half fallen from its braid. Cassian had never seen anyone look more beautiful. The realization arrived at a deeply inconvenient time. Elena caught him staring. What? Cassian looked away. Nothing. Her eyebrows rose. Even Theo noticed. But before anyone could say more, Garen stepped onto the bank. You see? Cassian slowly turned. Garen spread one hand toward Benji. The boy survived. Silence fell. Cassian stared at him. Garen continued. He faced real danger and overcame it. No. Garen frowned. Cassian handed Theo to a guard and kept Benji against his chest. He survived despite you. Garen's expression hardened. He needed the trial. He needed instruction. Cassian looked toward Elena. Patience. Then, at his sons. And someone who allowed them to be afraid. Garen's jaw tightened. You think kindness will make them strong? Cassian stepped closer. No. Pause. I know it already has. The guards around the basin went still. Cassian's voice carried across the water. Moonwater trials are suspended effective immediately. One elder stepped forward. Your Majesty. Immediately. No one argued again. Cassian looked at Garen. And Lord Voss is confined to his quarters pending investigation for unauthorized training, falsified records, and endangering the royal heirs. For the first time, Garen's calm cracked. Only slightly. You would arrest the man who made you strong? Cassian looked at Benji. Then Theo. Finally, he looked back at the man who had shaped his childhood. No. His voice was quiet. I am arresting the man who taught me pain was the same thing as strength. Garen's face became cold. As guards approached, he gave Cassian one final look. Then pray kindness makes them strong enough for the world. Cassian watched Benji curl closer against him. Theo reached for his father's hand. Cassian closed his fingers around it. It already has. And for the first time in generations, Moonwater Basin became silent, without a frightened child being forced beneath its surface. By noon, everyone in Blackwood Keep knew Lord Garen Voss had been confined. By evening, half the palace believed Elena Wren had caused it. She learned this while carrying a tray of dried lavender toward the infirmary. Two servants stopped whispering when she passed. A nobleman near the western stairs looked at her as though she had personally dismantled the monarchy with a soup spoon. Elena continued walking, then promptly caught her sleeve on a brass door handle. The tray tilted. She caught it against her hip. 3 bundles of lavender escaped anyway. One rolled beneath a bench. Elena stared after it. Excellent. A familiar voice came from behind her. You are remarkably consistent. She turned. Cassian stood at the end of the corridor. For once, he was not surrounded by guards. He looked tired. Not physically. Deeper than that. Elena crouched to retrieve the lavender. I prefer reliable flaws. Cassian bent before she could reach the final bundle. He picked it up. Their fingers touched when he handed it back. Neither moved immediately. Elena looked at his hand. Cassian looked at her. Then footsteps sounded nearby. They separated far too quickly. Elena cleared her throat. How are the boys? Asleep. Both? Benji fell asleep halfway through explaining how well he floated. Elena smiled. And Theo? He stayed awake long enough to explain that he would have rescued everyone himself if the rope had not been inconvenient. That sounds like Theo. Cassian's expression softened, then disappeared again. The investigation begins tonight. Elena knew what that meant. Garen was only the beginning. The council chamber remained lit until long after sunset. Training masters, archivists, attendant, guards. One by one, they were questioned. Cassian expected lies. He found something more troubling. Most of them admitted what had happened. They simply did not believe it was wrong. The Blackwood trials are older than any of us, one trainer said. Another added, every king endured them. An elderly councilwoman lowered her head. We believed Lord Voss had royal approval. Cassian stared at her. Did you ever ask? She did not answer. That silence became the answer. Elena sat at a small side table organizing copied records. She watched Cassian slowly understand the true size of the problem. Garen had ordered the secret sessions, but dozens of people had helped carry them out. Not because they hated the princes, because tradition had made cruelty look ordinary. A former attendant began to cry. I thought Prince Theo needed discipline. Cassian's jaw tightened. He was 6. My king, you survived the same training. Cassian went still. There was again. Survived. as though surviving something automatically made it worthy. Cassian looked down at the old records before him. His father's name appeared in several. His grandfather's too. Children reduced to times, distances, failures, cried after submersion, repeated exercise, refused shift, restrained, completed after exhaustion. Cassian closed the ledger. No more. The room became silent. One elder shifted. Your Majesty? Cassian stood. No child in this kingdom will be restrained in water for training. Several faces changed. No forced submersion. He continued. No punishment for panic. My king, one councilman objected, these practices built generations of warriors. Cassian looked at him. They also built generations of men who did not know the difference between fear and shame. No one answered. Cassian's eyes moved around the room. I will not call pain sacred simply because it is old. Elena stopped writing. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. This was not the man who had stood on the shore days earlier and said, "They are learning." He had changed. Not completely, not magically, but enough to choose differently. Later that night, Cassian found Elena alone in the herb room. She was tying dried willow bark into bundles. He leaned against the doorway. You should sleep. Elena did not look up. You have said that before. You ignored me before. I value consistency. Cassian stepped inside. For several seconds, he watched her work. Then he said, You were right. Elena stopped. Slowly, she turned. I would like that repeated. No. Just once more. Absolutely not. A smile escaped her. Cassian looked almost irritated by how much he liked it. Then his expression became serious. I should have known what was happening. Elena's smile faded. You were lied to. I was their father. You were also a king. That is not an excuse. No. Cassian looked at her, surprised. Elena placed the willow bark down. But blame is only useful if it changes what you do next. He stayed quiet. She continued. You came for them. Cassian's eyes lowered. Late, but you came. Something in his face softened. Elena suddenly became aware of how close they were standing. Cassian noticed too. His voice dropped. You always make things sound simple. They rarely are. No. His eyes stayed on hers. But they sound possible when you say them. Elena forgot every clever response she had ever possessed. So, naturally, the door burst open. Benji ran inside wearing one sock. Elena. Cassian closed his eyes. Theo appeared behind him. I told him to knock. You did not. Benji protested. I thought about telling you. Elena laughed. Cassian looked toward the ceiling, as though asking the moon for patience. Benji grabbed Elena's hand. Dinner. Theo added. Father forgot. Cassian frowned. I did not forget. You were brooding. I was working. Theo looked at Elena. He broods while working. Elena bit her lip. Cassian pointed toward the door. Both of you. Benji refused. Elena comes. Cassian looked at her. Something shy moved beneath all that authority. Will you? End of service. Elena hesitated only long enough to make him notice. Yes. Benji cheered. Theo looked smug. At dinner, Cassian said little. But when Elena reached for the bread, she found the warmest piece already placed beside her plate. She looked across the table. Cassian was discussing border reports with Theo. He never looked at her. Not once. But Elena smiled anyway. Because sometimes the quietest care was the hardest kind to hide. 1 year later, Moonwater Basin no longer sounded like a place children feared. It sounded like laughter. The old restraint posts had been removed from the stone platform. The iron hooks were gone. Bright ropes now marked the shallow areas, and 3 trained guards stood nearby with rescue poles instead of training straps. At the lower bank, 6 young pups splashed through a beginner lesson while their parents watched from the grass. Benji Blackwood was not among them. He was halfway across the lake. Elena. His voice carried over the water. Elena Wren looked up from the basket of towels beside her. Benji waved one arm proudly. The other arm immediately forgot what it was doing. His head dipped beneath the surface. Elena stood. Theo, swimming beside him, grabbed the back of his shirt. "Stop showing off." Benji resurfaced, coughing once. "I was waving. You were sinking. I can do two things." "Clearly not." Elena laughed. A deep voice behind her said, "I agree with Theo." She turned. Cassian stood several feet away, watching his sons. He looked much the same to anyone who did not know him. Dark clothes, straight shoulders, cold gray eyes that could still silence a council chamber. But Elena knew the differences now. She knew the small crease beside his mouth appeared when he was trying not to smile. She knew he rubbed his thumb against his ring when worried. She knew he drank his tea too hot and denied doing so. And she knew he had walked down to Moonwater Basin nearly every morning for the past year, even when royal meetings began before sunrise. Benji reached the shore and ran toward them, dripping water everywhere. Cassian lifted one hand. "Do not." Benji kept coming. "Benji." Too late. The boy wrapped both wet arms around his father's waist. Cassian closed his eyes. Theo climbed out behind him. "He warned you." "I missed him." "You saw him 10 minutes ago." Benji considered this. It was a difficult 10 minutes. Elena covered a smile. Cassian looked down at his soaked shirt. Then at Elena. "You find this amusing." "Deeply." "You encourage this behavior." "I encouraged emotional honesty." "This is emotional dampness." Theo laughed. Benji hugged him harder. Cassian surrendered. Later, when the boys ran toward the picnic tables, Elena remained beside the water. Cassian stayed too. Neither said anything for a while. The silence between them had changed over the past year. It was no longer uncertain. It had become comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. Cassian glanced at her. "You missed breakfast." Elena looked at him. "How do you know?" "You always take the honey rolls." "That is not evidence." "There were 2 left." She smiled. "You counted?" "No." "You counted." "I noticed." "You counted." Cassian looked toward the lake. Elena's smile widened. He had become very skilled at caring for her as long as no one called it caring. When winter came, extra firewood had appeared outside her rooms. When she worked late, dinner somehow remained warm. When a young physician from the southern pack spent too long complimenting her herb knowledge, Cassian had suddenly developed an intense interest in whether the man had completed his border paperwork. Elena had enjoyed that far more than she should have. She stepped closer. "Is Guard Daniel still forbidden from returning my baskets?" Cassian looked at her. "He was never forbidden. He told me you assigned him to the northern wall for 3 weeks. He needed discipline." "For smiling?" "For standing around." Elena laughed softly. Cassian's expression betrayed him. There it was. That tiny crease beside his mouth. "You were jealous." "I am Alpha King." "That does not answer the question." "It should." She turned toward the water before he could see how pleased she was. Cassian watched her. The truth was, jealousy had not frightened him nearly as much as missing her. 3 months earlier, Elena had spent 10 days visiting an herb settlement beyond the southern forest. The palace had become unbearable. Benji asked when she was returning every morning. Theo pretended not to care, and then checked the gate twice every afternoon. Cassian had done neither. He had simply found reasons to pass the herb room despite knowing it was empty. When she finally returned, muddy and tired, he had nearly crossed the courtyard too quickly. He had stopped himself. Barely. Elena looked over. "You're brooding." "I am thinking." "Theo says those are the same thing." "Theo is 6. 7 now." Cassian frowned. "I know how old my son is." "I'm teasing you." "I know." That made her pause. A year ago, teasing the Alpha King had felt dangerous. Now it felt strangely like home. Theo's voice suddenly rang across the basin. "Father." Cassian turned. Both boys stood on the old stone ledge. Benji grinned. "Jump." Cassian went still. The word carried farther than it should have. For a moment, the lake disappeared. He remembered being 5. His father behind him. Cold hands. Cold water. No choice. No one coming. Elena saw the change in his face. She stepped closer. You don't have to. Cassian looked at her. That was exactly why he could. He removed his coat. Benji cheered. Theo shouted, Not from there. Come up here. Cassian walked toward the ledge. Elena followed to the edge. Benji reached for his father's hand. Theo took the other. Cassian looked down at both boys. Ready? Benji nodded violently. Theo grinned. Cassian looked back at Elena. She stood below, smiling. Warm. Steady. The woman who had once jumped into this lake because she thought he was letting his children drown. The woman who had changed the meaning of the place without ever asking for credit. Cassian smiled. Then he jumped. All three hit the water together. A great wave rolled toward shore. Elena screamed as it soaked the front of her dress. She stared at them. Cassian surfaced. Benji was laughing. Theo looked delighted. Elena put both hands on her hips. That was intentional. Cassian brushed wet hair from his forehead. I have no idea what you mean. You are a terrible liar. Careful. Your Majesty. He smiled. A real one. Then, he held out his hand toward her. Elena looked at it. Then at the water. I am wearing both boots today. Cassian's eyes warmed. I noticed. She took his hand anyway. And when he pulled her laughing into Moonwater Basin, there was no fear left in the sound. Only water. Children. Love growing slowly where pain had once lived. For generations, Blackwood children had been taught that strength meant surviving alone. Cassian taught his sons something different. Fear could be spoken. Help could be accepted. Love did not make a wolf weak. And a father did not have to stand on the shore while his children struggled. Sometimes the strongest thing he could do was jump in beside them. And this was where Elena and Cassian's story finally grew quiet. If you are still here with me, then maybe you already understood why this story was never only about two little wolf pups in dangerous water. It was about what happens when trust is broken, when people misunderstand your heart, and when old wounds are disguised as tradition. There are moments in life when you are betrayed, blamed, or treated as though your pain does not matter. You may want to explain everything, beg to be understood, or prove that you are right. But dignity often looks quieter than that. It means knowing when to stop chasing people who have already chosen not to see you. It means walking away without destroying yourself, just to win an argument. It means carrying the pain without begging anyone to validate it, and slowly learning to choose yourself again. Cassian learned that surviving pain did not make pain sacred. Elena showed that kindness could be strong without becoming loud. And both of them learned that love did not have to arrive like a storm. It could arrive through warm tea, a saved piece of bread, a jealous glance no one admitted to, and the simple decision to stay when someone was afraid. If that message reached you tonight, leave one word in the comments: dignity. And if you enjoyed this journey, a gentle like, share, or subscribe would mean a lot to Alpha Wolf Saga. Thank you for staying until the very last moment.